Now listen up.
Insights EDU 2025 is almost here. Join us February 12th through 14th in New Orleans for the most anticipated higher education marketing and enrollment management event of the year.
I like that.
Imagine 3 action-packed days filled with game-changing insights, real-world case studies, and a hands-on workshop designed to transform your marketing strategy and boost your program enrollment. Learn from speakers at Google, Meta, Reddit, MIQ Digital, and top schools across the nation. Network with industry leaders, exchange ideas, and discover the tools to drive real results. This is your opportunity to stay ahead of the competition and meet the demands of today's modern learners. Don't wait. Spots are filling fast. Mark your calendar, rally your team, and head to insightsedu.com to register now. The era of the modern learner is here, and you need to be part of it. We'll see you in New Orleans. Ellucian Live is taking place April 6th through 9th, 2025 in Orlando, Florida.
You just made the list!
Get ready for an unforgettable experience at Ellucian Live 2025. Join visionary leaders from institutions worldwide as we dive into groundbreaking ideas, cutting-edge solutions, and transformative best practices that will ignite your passion for innovation. This is your chance to connect, collaborate, and propel your institution into the future. Do not miss out.
Let's go!
Do you want to accelerate your professional development? Do you want to get exclusive early access to ad-free episodes, extended episodes, bonus episodes, original content, that's right, original content, invites to special events, and more? Do you want to get all this while helping to sustain EdUp? Then go to edupexperience.com. That's EDUP experience.com and subscribe today.
Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. This is Dr. Joe Salustio coming to you here on another episode of EdUp. By the time this episode airs, ladies and gentlemen, we will have surpassed 1,000 episodes of the EdUp Experience, probably beating our mark and our 5-year anniversary. So we've had a lot of conversations here on this podcast, and it's amazing. And I'm really humbled by the influence that it has. In fact, I was just at the American Association of State College and Universities, where there are over 400 college and university presidents from state institutions at a location in Puerto Rico, which I had the honor of attending through my work at Ellucian as VP of Industry Engagement. And being in the room, knowing that I have interviewed like at least 50 or so of those college presidents was pretty awesome. And having them call out and go, "Hey, Joe, and I love the episode, and let's do it again." And I'm like, well, there's a line, but you get the point. I mean, there's a lot of conversations, there's a lot of good work that's happened, and I tell the industry, as I told the college presidents as I was standing up delivering just a couple minutes of information, was this podcast is designed to help higher education presidents and others tell the story of what's good about the work that we do. And everything around us is not designed to do that. None of the media is designed to do that. The public, everything being printed is about how higher ed is failing society. And we know that if you work in the industry, we know that that is not true. We see students going on and getting a degree and getting out and getting jobs. We're just not great at telling our story. And that's where EdUp can come in. And so if you're out there, college president, you can tell your story. And if you've run an institution before, come tell the story about the work that you do. And we're going to hear from somebody today that's been a former college president, is currently working at a really innovative organization, but has developed new models on how to look at students and success. And we're going to get into that, but I'm going to get my co-host in first. She and I have worked together in an institution. We've known each other. She's co-hosted before. In fact, I've interviewed her. She was an interim president. And now I think she's unofficially the world leading AI strategist in higher education, unofficially. Mm-hmm. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Emily Barnes, AI strategist, higher ed writer, author, influencer. Basically, she does it all. Emily, welcome back to the EdUp Experience. How are you?
Oh, I'm really well. Thank you, Joe. I like it. Mm-hmm.
And how is where are you in Michigan? Are you not in Michigan? Is it snowing yet?
It's cold. Yeah, we're in Michigan. Mm-hmm. It's cold. It's chilly. In Michigan, it starts snowing like basically at Halloween, and it stays there until May. So, but a little bit warmer than usual this year, but it's,
yikes!
I know.
Yeah. Stay warm, Emily, and we're gonna great conversation here at the EdUp Experience can keep you warm in those moments when you're stuck in your house. You can always go to EdUp and listen to great people talk.
And
like
that's exactly how I manage the cold. I wrap myself with EdUp every day.
Thank you. I will send you the check later. Ladies and gentlemen, let's bring in our guest. He's Dr. Jayson Boyers. He's the Executive VP for Business Model Transformation at Core Education and a former college president. Jayson, welcome to an EdUp. Mike, how are you?
Good, Joe. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to have the conversation. I love how you started with telling the story because I do think we need more of that.
Don't you think, right? Like, just, before we get into it, it's like we allowed the detractors. Somebody told me recently I shouldn't use the word detractors. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to use detractors because that's exactly what's happening. Like these people are devaluing what we do, whoever these people are. There's some legitimate concern, right? So we have to honor and recognize legitimate concern like ROI and these things. But as far as the value of college when the data is there, we haven't just done a good job of telling that story. And it's really amazing to see how far it can go before we fight back in higher ed. What do you think?
We change economic destinies of families. And I'm talking about generational change. I was a first generation college graduate. And I will tell you, we didn't talk about going to college in my family. So when I became a college president, I used to call myself the accidental president because there's no reason why somebody who came from my background would ever be bet on to graduate college, let alone lead a college. And I got this nice note when I got inaugurated at my college from my 11th grade lit teacher. And I remember this note. It's so beautiful. I'm reading the whole note. She's so proud of me. And then the last paragraph was, yeah, who would have thought? And I'm like, oh,
amazing.
Well, we'll take it. We'll take it, right? You take the compliments where you can get them.
That's exactly right.
And, Jayson, one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on and talk is because you've written about design models for technology and student success. And, this is like the thing now. How do we use technology? How do we use artificial intelligence? I give keynotes now all over the world for Lucian and otherwise. And I tell people as I'm talking to them, I'm like, go get AI, guys, go get it. And everybody looks at me and laughs and is like, but that's the message. It's like, go get AI. But as an administrator, what does that mean? How do I get AI? How do I meaningfully use it and what for? Talk to us about what you've done, the model that you've designed, and really what the secret is.
Yeah, a couple things with that. And AI has become the kind of the buzzword around this new technology suite of tools, right? Yeah. And there's a new one popping up every day. But it's interesting. I was co-leading a workshop in Wisconsin on future proofing your organization or your college, and it was so focused on the classroom that people hadn't really thought about using AI to help with the business model, to help recognize patterns, to help with student retention, because you're able to harness AI to allow you to make good decisions about where you can insert yourself before the student gets in trouble. And we began talking about this, and it's kind of a new concept. People were so worried about our students plagiarizing from AI that they forgot about how useful the tool can be with data and patterns. And the second thing I would say is that it is a tool, right? It is absolutely a tool. But broader than that, the model that I developed more out of necessity was how could I move a resource-challenged institution to sustainability? And how could I do it in a way that brought people along? And we were true to our values, and we were able to make impacts. And so I began using this value lens structure in which we would identify who we wanted to show up as. And who we wanted to show up as is where we had distinctive advantages in the marketplace. And then we began to develop the plan around that versus trying to boil the ocean and worried about, okay, we're going to add these 7 programs, but we don't know why. We want to be true to our values. And then thinking about the technology tools and AI and the advancement and understanding how data can be grouped and patterns recognized and anticipated. All of that really confirms the work we did in moving the organization forward on where to invest, where the impacts were, and what levers we needed to pull.
I like your style, dude.
What
And
is explain the value lens structure to us, and then Emily, I'll pass it to you as we move forward.
yeah, so the value lens is it really asks what is your kind of guiding focus as an institution. Then it talks a little bit in the next section about strategic alignment. What are the things you're going to do to make sure that you're aligned with your mission, your purpose, why you exist. And then we layered on top of it what I call the mission impacts levers.
Mm.
Mission is where you're distinctive, right? Why you going away, why something would be lost if your institution goes away. Where are you distinctive? Where in the marketplace do you hold a distinctive brand value? Do you hold a distinctive competency value? Where can you come in and live your mission fully? And then impacts are what are the things, understanding where you're distinctive, what are the things that are going to have the greatest impact over the next 12 months, next 3 years, next 5 years, in beginning to identify the 3 to 5 things that are really going to move the needle. And if you accomplish them, they're going to absolutely change the outcomes for your institution and your community. And finally, the levers are if you've committed to these impacts, how are you going to resource it? What are the levers you're going to pull? If you say you're committed to these impacts, you have to resource that change. You can't just expect it to happen. And so you start committing those resources, and that's the levers. In this whole process that I brought institutions through allows them to focus their resources where it will have the greatest impact, and then bring resources back into the institution so they can reinvest them in the overall institutional life and community. But it really focuses them in. I tell institutions all the time, you're defined as much by what you say no to as what you say yes to. And no is never forever, but no may mean this year. These are the impacts that are going to move us forward in a more defined way.
Mm. Emily.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think that and Jayson has addressed this before, but with small institutions that are definitely what's the word dependent on tuition, all right, and enrollment ways, it goes up, it goes down, and there's a lot of factors that influence that. But part of this model, I see it as like a solution or a way to frame. I'm going to say it really simply, really, really like the squirrel effect. A lot of small institutions that are trying to gain enrollment, they're trying to bring attention to the institution, they're trying to up their brand identity. But for me, thinking about this, it's more like a focus strategy so that we're not reaching into or bringing in things that are going to deter us from what makes us distinctive. For example, and it's more like I would say, it's like, I'm just going to say it. A lot of small institutions can start doing things out of necessity, out of scarcity, to promote their brand, like bring in maybe take a donation that would equal a building, for instance, maybe something that would distract from the overall, here's what we're focused on this year. And to me, this framework really focuses, here's what we do as an institution, here's what makes us distinct, and then how are we now staying true to who we are. And Jayson, maybe you can talk a little bit more about, some of the circumstances that has necessitated the creation of, like where this came from. What solution is it solving?
Yeah, necessity is the mother of invention, right? So I'll tell you the very high level story. My first presidency, I was so excited, Joe, about becoming, it was a lifelong dream to become a college president. And my furniture is on the way to the new home, and I'm getting ready to go. And the CFO calls me and says, we have a 20% gap in anticipated revenue. 20% is material, and we don't have payroll through the end of Thanksgiving. I was coming in July. And I'm like, oh, okay. All right. So let's begin to think through. They had
Welcome home.
Welcome home. They had borrowed their endowment. They didn't have any reserve funds. We basically were living paycheck to paycheck as an institution, and I couldn't boil the ocean. There wasn't either a silver bullet or there wasn't enough resources to invest into everything. So this is really where I took this structure and said, we're going to determine what are the things that are going to move the needle for us, and I want to make sure they reflect who we are when we show up as our best. And it was that simple of taking people through the process. And I got there, and what we found was they were a business focused institution. And what we found was what makes us distinctive. It was an interesting question that no one could answer. And we began talking about how we could be distinctive in the marketplace. And because we had that conversation, we actually were able to form a partnership with GameStop and train every one of their retail managers in some specific competencies that they needed. And that bridged us from a cash flow standpoint through that first year and allowed us to invest in the things that really allowed us to be a stakeholder in our community and to begin to build the trust within our community. And the faculty got on board, and the leadership team got on board. I remember the first graduation class after my first year there. One of my cabinet members turned to me and said, I had a dream last night, and the dream was 5 years later, I'm going to look back at you and say, we did this because we survived that early onslaught. But it really was, Emily, you said this is really a focus tool, right? It allows us to focus. I would even say further than that, it's a reflective tool because some people may think that's outside. This is looking internally and say, who are we when we show up best and how we exist? And it allows a resource limited institution to decide this is where we're putting our chips in. This is where we're making our stand. And that can uncover new opportunities. I would have never heard about the GameStop opportunity other than we were having conversations that led them to pay attention to us.
What do you do with, tell us what that looks like when you're going through why you're distinctive and you sit down and you realize this, like if we don't define our distinctiveness, we don't have position in the marketplace and therefore we will have no students. I mean, do you just come in one day and look at everybody and go, all right, everybody figure out why we're distinctive? What did that process look like? And there's probably inertia, right? Where you say to somebody, well, we're not distinctive. And somebody goes, yes, we are. We've been here for 297 billion years. And we're, of course I mean, there's always this inertia. How do you design a process to do that and get everybody on board?
I think that's where the value based process comes because you instead of starting out with, you're not distinctive, you start out with what makes us distinctive. And you're trying to drill down into that and have that conversation. I did coffees with the president. I did monthly town halls. I worked to show them, here's the problem that we're going to solve together. And so it doesn't become an attacking mode. And by defining the values of how you want to show up in the marketplace, once we agree on those, then it becomes evident on the impacts that we want to have. So a lot of it is conversation, and instead of pointing a finger, it's asking a question, right? And that's the cultural work you have to do, I believe, in higher ed to create healthy change. One person told me, you can do anything once, but if you want to have it repeatable, it's got to be authentic to who you are. So really a cultural conversation that you have to go through to define those values and get agreement. Here are our values. Here's how we're going to show up. And now let's create the plan that allows us to do that. I do occasionally you speak really honestly. And as a president, I always thought, I want to make sure that the title and the office doesn't get in the way of allowing people to speak freely. But occasionally things just blurt out. And I can remember one person in a conversation saying, well, what if we aren't distinctive? Because when I was going around distinctive, here's what I heard. Oh, we have small classes. We care about the individual. I'm like, Google
We're student first.
Just Google it and see how many institutions pop up. And I remember they're like, well, what if we can't be distinctive? Then I said, we probably don't exist. And it was an honest statement. I didn't think about it before I said it. It was just really, listen, this is
That's a fact.
That's a fact. I love that. And so you want to frame a model where you agree on the key areas that you feel like you internally you really feel at your heart that this is what makes us distinctive. And I tasked a very talented provost with helping transform the curriculum to what we called, the Cleary Mind, and we absolutely had a new relationship because we brought in outside stakeholders to say, here are our values. Do you guys agree? And how can we show up for you this way? This is an ongoing conversation. And when you have it that way, that creates transformative change that actually lasts.
Emily.
I was listening to what you were saying, and I think that it's easy for those to use those buzzwords, like, oh, we're student centered. I love to put the student first. We have small class sizes, and I remember someone saying nobody actually, oh gosh, it's leaving me, but nobody wishes for so few students that the class sizes have to be so small, right? Because most of the time it means we have a what's the word, comfy, we have a comfy population or a smaller population. So for many of these institutions, I think that we can chase the data. We can say, okay, well, we're a business institution and we've done business very well for X amount of years, but now the big hot ticket item is medical, or remember the cannabis management wave, that came through, and people are like, grabbing these things. For an institution that's also trying to stay relevant, and that's trying to also stay in a place of thriving, not surviving. How would you coach them into maybe dwindling down to identifying, going beyond like making them the unique, but maybe getting down to those core values that, how do we really leverage what we're made of? And I'm not saying exactly what, how would you walk through, you have conversations, but, what's the process of elimination? How do you really get to that point where this is where we're going, and we're still going to be able to do this in this world of conflicting trends and newness, the industry changes? Because I think that's hard for people too, is that this is like, you could say, I'm a liberal arts institution, this is what we do this really well, but how does that remain relevant across industries with their values still intact?
You just made the list.
Mark your calendars for Insights EDU 2025, February 12th through 14th. Insights EDU 2025 is the can't-miss higher education marketing and enrollment management conference of the year. We're taking over New Orleans with speakers from Google, Meta, Reddit, MIQ Digital, and top schools across the country. Discover how AI is transforming marketing and enrollment management, how to assess online program opportunities, and meet the demands of today's modern learner. Don't wait. Spots are going quickly. Register now at insightsedu.com. Welcome to the era of the modern learner.
Let's go.
At Ellucian Live 2025, we're going to explore the magic of innovation. We want to imagine, believe, and achieve. It's happening April 6th through 9th, 2025 in Orlando, Florida, and we're going to explore technology, modernization, and
artificial intelligence.
Explore the latest technology solutions, discover industry insights, and make valuable connections as a global community. It's time to register for Ellucian Live 2025 at elive.ellucian.com.
Do you want to get invites to special events? Do you want to get exclusive early access to ad-free episodes, extended episodes, bonus episodes, behind-the-scenes episodes, and original content? Do you want to accelerate your professional development? Then go to edupexperience.com, that's EDUP experience.com, and become a subscriber today.
Yeah, and so we've been talking, I think, at a very conceptual range, and I can hear people think, yeah, this all is right. It sounds good, but how do I apply this to my institution? And I think that is going through the actual process of identifying through research. And this is the interesting thing, because when you think about who you are as an institution, what historically you have done. You talked about liberal arts institutions. And I've heard a lot about how it's difficult to differentiate sometimes in the liberal arts. But I would think there are historic relationships that you have as institutions that you want to tap into. There are communities in which you live in as a part of that community that you want to understand how that community is evolving and what that community needs, and how the education that you're providing helps feed that into the community and helps create citizens who become a part of that community and stakeholders in that community. When you talk about critical thinking skills, okay, critical thinking skills are a part of what you want to do as an institution, let's say. How does that apply to the industries that surround you? How does it apply to the community institutions that are around you? And how can you contribute to that? When you identify these what I would call value distinctive lenses that you work through, and then you say, okay, how do we identify with these new populations? How do we bring new populations into our college and put our specific DNA on them so that when they graduate, they have something from the institution that's uniquely we've contributed? And that's where you get into each of these areas. What does it mean? What does it look like? How do we know we're succeeding? And how do we do it? All four of those questions are answered for every one of those distinctive areas. And you drill that down through the research you do. And how you apply this specifically, and I think this is important, is I've applied it with institutions because we do what's called a value-based budgeting, in which we take those specific impact areas and we say, those are what we're going to resource. And there's two types of expenses that are the cost of doing business, then expenses that support what we said was the biggest impacts for this institution as we go forward. Any other expense outside of that, if choices have to be made, those expenses are where we have a conversation. And it creates a tool by which, especially institutions who are looking at kind of creating a more sustainable path forward, they actually have a budgetary tool now in which they can talk through. Because I tell them, again, you may have to go back and say, not that this isn't important, but it's not what we said will move the needle for us this year. And it's not in line with what we prioritized as our key values that we want to invest in.
Epic.
You know what I like about that is that framework of thinking, assigning, these are our high value programs or initiatives. We're going to resource them. And then what you haven't yet resourced, or things that maybe have a little less value than the things you put as a priority, are the things you have to decide that you're going to stop doing. And I think that's where we have a lot of conversation in higher ed. What we want to do this, we have to do this, but what are we going to stop doing? Because there just isn't money doesn't grow on trees, as it were, right? And you can't just resource every single thing that you want to do because you stretch yourself too thin. That's how you become upside down, and your expenses will outpace your revenues. So what are we going to stop doing? And sometimes it seems nobody wants to stop doing anything because somebody's always got something that's a passion project, or they don't want to let it go. So when you apply that value framework, does it create these really unique, like, okay, we've got to really decide if this is valuable for us or not?
So I love how you just framed that, because what I would say is it creates the lens, right, that you're looking through when you have these conversations. It creates intentionality. And most colleges get in trouble when they're not intentional about their decisions. It's easier to not make a decision than to make one, and they start eating away at their endowment. They start eating away. They'd rather do that than have to make those difficult decisions. And what I tell institutions all the time is this is not boiling it down to we can only do things that are profitable. I worked with an institution that did this value-based process and value-based budgeting and used the mission impacts and levers. And there was an area that, because it had historical significance to them, I said, it is absolutely okay to say, we are going to still continue to invest in this program. It's not profitable, but it's so linked to our identity that we're going to do that. The victory there is they made an intentional decision around that.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a passive decision. And what I like to tell institutions all the time is Be intentional now. Make your decisions now while they're still your decisions to make. Because eventually, if you don't, those decisions are going to be others to make. And that's the key. That's the key part of this is it's about intentionality and making decisions now. And again, no's aren't no's forever. But at some point, you have to decide what's going to move the needle. And here's why you have to decide, and I believe it. You have to decide it because of me, Joe. Because if these colleges don't exist, the people like me would get lost in some of the community colleges and the large state institutions. I would not have known. I ended up getting my doctorate degree from Creighton, which was a great experience, but I was prepared through my undergraduate being a first generation student. I couldn't have even survived a master's program, let alone a doctorate program. If these small colleges in private institutions don't exist, there's a whole population of students who are never going to be able to navigate the other environments. The other environments are good for some students, but I specifically want to protect private colleges because I know the pathway that and the way they can change lives. So make the decisions now, be intentional, use a tool and use this mission impacts levers as a tool so that you can be intentional about your decisions and decide, yes, I'm going to do this despite or no, I'm not, because we need to invest in these areas to bring us more revenue so we can do more things.
Emily, I see you smiling over there. You must like what's being said here.
Oh, well, I do because, of course, I like it when I hear somebody who's passionate about education because I'm passionate about education because I had the same experience. I did go to a state school. I went to the larger institutions personally, but then where I've applied my career has been in smaller institutions or private institutions because I feel like they have it's like less sanitary. That's not the right word. Sterile. It's like a less sterile environment. It's more homey. It's a place where I think maybe those that don't fit the mold can find a place. Adult students in particular, where there's ways to modify services to meet their needs and to have better insights. And I think you also have more of that human element to it. I say I'm a first generation executive. I think that for students who are coming into institutions, it's so impactful to be able to belong. We use the word like belonging a lot in higher ed, but that sense of belonging can really be a huge factor between whether or not a student succeeds and becomes who it was that they were supposed to be in life. And I think that I think that private small institutions can really have a big impact for those students because again, I think about like how hard it is for a regular student to get to class on time. You add that to giant parking lots and elevators and whatever else. And then, entering into an environment where you're one of a few versus one of many can be very difficult, I think, for students, especially now, as more students are returning to adult students are recovering and finishing their degrees. So that's where my smile was coming from. But I was also thinking, you talked about the how about all this, and I want to revisit the AI conversation, just if I can, just a little bit.
Yes, absolutely.
Because the how is a big factor. And just to kind of preface this part about AI, I do think it's common for us to think about the classroom first. Like, how can AI help students? And of course, how can it relate to teaching and learning? And I really feel like, AI can have it's not just AI. AI has been around since the 50s. It's been around a long time. But the access to it has drastically changed in recent years. And you see institutions then trying to scale, trying to evolve using AI. And I think that many people think it's a technology source. It's like an aid or it's like an add-on, it's a tool that we're going to use. When really, I think we discussed like the significance of AI practice. So I was wondering, Jayson, what's your thoughts on, how institutions can really leverage AI beyond thinking, the classroom?
Yeah, I think you and I have had conversations about how to get the community ready to integrate AI into how they're thinking about things, what they're doing with the students they're using, retention. We've talked about there is I think there's a socialization that needs to take place. The AI becomes a part of their ideation as they're working through the institution and working on how to serve students better. And that's where you bring in AI, you align it with understanding how to group data to give better um, better sources for how we develop policies, how we implement strategies, and where we put our investments and where we place our educated bets. One of the things that Joe, I wanted to bring in researchers and say, we did this model. How did it impact? And then what can it tell us about future investments? And I think that's a key area AI can be a part of, is not only looking back, but looking forward and in predicting and allowing you to make better educated guesses on how you integrate what you're doing, and maybe even identify where you're most effective, where it has the greatest impact.
Well, and I think too that sometimes we think about AI as far as like a business intelligence tool, or, we like to use that word data driven, right? And
Artificial intelligence.
artificial intelligence, data driven. And I think as a culture or as a practice, there's a difference between data driven and data informed, right? Because you can be, I want my data, but if we don't understand it, if we can't, process those insights, if we can't make it part of our regular practice, you have gaps and lack of consistency there. But looking at institutional practice, how are we implementing these, or how not implementing technologies, but how are we utilizing the benefits of AI to inform where we go and how we get there? And I think, looking at the two different ones, like there's a temporal focus, which is we're going to implement this AI technology. It's going to need updates, and that should make things go around a little bit. And that's not really the case. I would say it's more of like a functional scope, right? Where we're addressing the what and how AI is being used at the institution, so that we can really gain the value of the benefits, the insights that it can bring. Of course, it streamlines processes. Of course, it can work on operational efficiency. But I think it's adopting it as an information tool, as a as a way to steer the institution through these, like the turbulent waters of higher ed of the future. It's kind of funny that we say it, but there's so much volatility in higher ed right now that I think that many institutions are looking for their strategy. How are we going to get through this? What are these tools? But it takes 5 years, right, to get that strategy going and get that implemented. So speaking of looking at these institutions as they form a plan, if a president comes to you and says, how do we want to, help me even start with this AI conversation, help me even get there. Like, how do we even approach it? Because I don't know a lot about technology. And I think, of course, you don't have to be a technologist to be able to talk about this, but from a leadership perspective, how would you discuss this from your view with presidents for yourself?
And I always go back to pragmatic, right? So anytime you're trying to implement a change or normalize maybe something that's new or outside of the scope of what you've worked, you need those advocates, you need those individuals who are going to adopt it. And rather than saying we're going to adopt this as an institution, it would be finding pockets where you can normalize and socialize the leveraging of AI to look at data, to understand a current problem. What solution are you trying to create? What's the problem statement that you're trying to solve to, and to normalize the use of AI there. And whether it is resources, whether it is understanding how you're serving students, setting them up for success. And this probably, Joe, is we could probably do 3 different podcasts on this, right?
Oh yeah, no doubt.
But when I'm stepping back, what I want to know is let's start by solving some key problems of the institution and begin to socialize how we can use this technology to help us solve those problems. But I want to say this, whether we're talking about integrating AI, which I think is critical for these institutions to do on a number of different levels, or we're talking about the value-based budgeting or the tools, the key part of this is it all comes back to who you are as an institution, in being able to be very focused. I talk to institutions about 4 things. It is, how does what you're doing align with your core values and who you are? How are you going to resource um, the this in a way that amplifies your strength. How are you engaging then the strategies and pulling the levers? And finally, then it's about continuous improvement, because I am a big believer that growth creates optimization. Optimization doesn't create growth. And how are you stretching yourself, growing into new marketplaces, using and leveraging the intellectual capital you have to grow, and allowing that growth to drive your optimization? And I think that's where institutions sometimes, it is, you feel more control when you start with that. We're a continuous improvement institution. We're going to drill down. The problem is, then you're scaling inefficiencies, because you're trying to measure down to the lowest controllable thing, versus looking at being efficient and grow, and allow that growth to bring you down to how to solve these other problems that exist when you grow.
One thing, Jayson, as we get close to the end here, just a couple more questions, but I've been thinking for a little while and haven't yet seen it. How important, as a search firm or university goes after their next president, how important AI, I'm going to call it knowledge, but just having general awareness of artificial intelligence and how to use it to, or not even not application necessarily, but to be able to, as a leader, say, you know what, here's how technology can enhance the business. We have to be aware of what artificial intelligence can do. We have to be aware of how it is affecting us personally. And you start to look at job ads for university president. They look the very same as they have for years. The only difference is financial acumen has gone from the bottom to the top, right? But you just wonder, at some point you're going to see some line item that says technology awareness, because a university president, at least in my time interviewing over 300, I can go back 5 years ago, and the gap between university and president and technology knowledge could be as much as you wanted it to be. If you wanted to be far away from your technology and trust your people to do it, you could do that. Now, not that you don't trust your people, but you have to be aware of what's going on, or else it's going to affect your business negatively. Do you think we'll see this evolution come to college presidents, where you just have to have technology awareness?
Yeah, I think I'm going to say this. I'm probably going to say it wrong, because I've known Dr. Barnes for probably 15 years, I would say. And when I first met her, she was coming out of school with a master's in library science. And I remember her telling me, all librarians are technologists. And I think you're going to get to a point where presidents need to be at least open to being surrounding themselves with technologists, if not being the technologists. I think those are the next generation. We're in a technology and information age that is advancing so quickly, and it's not about the newest shiny thing or the newest technology. It is about how we connect and how we communicate. And that is the underlying thing. So if you have a president who's open, they don't have to know everything about everything. What they have to do is be smart enough to surround themselves with people who understand that when we're talking about technology, we're talking about connection. And that is where that real difference makes. And I think you are exactly right, Joe. You look at these, I'm going to make an analogy. You want to talk about AI plagiarism. You look at these presidential profiles, they all look like they got spit out by Chat GPT.
Yeah, somebody goes, find the other company's presidential
and
profiles.
I've just made an enemy of every recruiting firm. So I'm gonna open my I'm gonna be the greeter at Applebee's now going forward. But it is really,
we all know it. It's a fact anyway.
Yes, it is. It is so important, though, to not confuse, because if you tell people, oh, you need to be a technologist, or you need to, be steeped in AI, you get resistance. If you tell people we need to reimagine how connection happens and how that connection leads to learning, well, okay, then we have a conversation.
Yeah, that's leadership. Yeah.
Well, and I think it has to do a lot with change management as well, because it's not so much that one lens is technology, but it's also just being in the mix. I think that the biggest change for college presidents is that, you're no longer a figurehead. I think that's the big, there's figurehead and donation dinners and fundraising and events and the handshaking and the face and the voice. But I think that when it comes to real change, like impactful change, it's going to require a lot of work, a true transformation. That leader is in there on the ground, not micromanaging at all, but leading that, like being the center of that vision and helping the institution maintain it. And I just think that the biggest piece of that puzzle is that right now the lens can be technology. It might be it'll probably be something different later, but it's not that you have to be like this, connoisseur of whatever, but having real knowledge about what's happening in the climate, what's happening in technology evolution, what's happening in the trends, understanding your community, understanding the market, understanding where your people are. All of those things associated when it comes to transformation. I think that the biggest changes presidents are going to be more into those key parts in the mix, a little bit more hands-on than I would say they were in the past or are now. But because
it's like you know what it is, Emily? It's if somebody faculty member created an academic program and launched it with on a new academic calendar, the president would be very interested to know that took place, right? Or be very involved in it. It's something that it can affect the business so rapidly and so tremendously, like a piece of technology. To have that implemented without awareness and how it's going to affect the business is something that can't happen anymore from the top level.
Great example. Having discussions about implementing AI technologies without first having conversations with all your constituents, everybody at the table, understanding the culture of that, how it influences teaching and learning, how it influences business practices. And I think that how is it that we're going to address it from a policy perspective, the risk factors of implementing technologies without having, your ethics already aligned prior, understanding how it's being used in your classrooms today as a president, like what
rooted in your values.
Content development, like our course is already developed using AI. And what if it's, are we able to do that? So I think that, looking at this overall, and there's been a lot of discussions recently about, copyright infringement and whether or not it's, copyright being, because all these tools are trained on data that already exists, but, not understanding right now today how AI is being used in your institution and the risk factors that can be associated is a big liability for some institutions. And I think it's going to be one of those things that comes a little too late for many colleges and universities when they discover like, oh, we don't have some of these pre-planning things in place to make sure that we can utilize these tools effectively in a way that's ethical for our population. For example, just one example, early detection tools when it comes to admissions processes. Did we make sure that when we agreed to the contract that we understood where the data came from that trained
bias ingrained in data?
Exactly.
All of these things.
Mm-hmm. And then does that open us to, circumstances later that we have to navigate and now, repair our reputation because we had a tool that, that we didn't, really vet properly. So I think it's like that due diligence and vetting associated with AI implementation and practices that I think is critical area at this moment. But
and Joe, if I can just bring it back, I think there's a Franciscan monk I follow that I just love his wisdom, and he talks about how you do one thing is how you do everything. And I think what we're talking about here is how do you change and transformation happen in relationship? And that has to be the one thing that moves things forward. Otherwise, it's never going to last. And as we're seeing these rapid changes, I get people like Dr. Barnes around me because they understand this stuff at a deeper level. She has educated me on just the bias of that is sometimes ingrained in some of these approaches, and just being aware of that helps you think through how you're going to make a difference, because ultimately everything we're talking about, the health of the institution, how we use and recognize patterns within data, how we leverage these new technologies and AI and other ways to pull things together and ideate. All of it doesn't matter if we're not living our mission by making students' lives better. And that's really where we have to end up. And that's where, when you're rooted in your values and aligned with your mission, that's where having these tools to be intentional about what you're doing matters most.
Jayson, where can we read about this model or explore it, find out facts about it? Or is there, I know if you've written an article, maybe we could put it in the show notes if everybody wants to check it out.
Yeah, actually, we had a peer-reviewed study based on this model being implemented and the outcomes. That can be found online. We'll give you a link for that.
Sounds good.
And there's an article.
University Business.
University.
I think I saw it.
That's where I read it. Yep. University Business. You can check it out. Just search for your name and you can find it nice and easy.
And we'll give you both links to that for the show notes. But I really appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation, Joe.
Well, it's been great to have you both here. And Emily, you've come back from a long hibernation of co-hosting. It's been probably
my pleasure. I'm so happy.
2.5 years. Everybody, the foremost, unofficially the best ever AI expert in the history of the land, right? I think it says, let me read your title, best ever AI expert. That's what it says here. Mm-hmm. AI strategist, Dr. Emily Barnes. Always a pleasure to have you. Come back anytime. And our guest today, he's your guest. He's Dr. Jayson Boyers. He's the Executive Vice President for Business Model Transformation at Core Education, former college president, and AI-aware leader. And I love your policies and the way you frame things, Jayson. It's been a pleasure and honor having you here.
Thank you so much, Joe. I appreciate the time.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp. Attention, higher ed leaders. Are you ready to transform your marketing and enrollment strategy? Don't miss Insights EDU, February 12th through 14th in New Orleans, the premier conference for higher education marketing and enrollment management. Spots are filling fast. Register now at insightsedu.com. Welcome to the era of the modern learner.
Let's go!
Are you going to miss Ellucian Live this year?
I don't think so.
Exactly. So you might as well register right now at elive.ellucian.com. Ellucian Live 2025, April 6th through 9th in Orlando, Florida. Do not miss it.
Do you want to get exclusive early access to ad-free episodes, extended episodes, bonus episodes, original content, invites to special events, and more? Do you want to accelerate your professional development? Do you want to get all this while helping to sustain EdUp? Then go to edupexperience.com. That's EDUP experience.com and become a subscriber today.